Welcome to this week's episode. Today we are talking about an aviation business management topic that is kind of tangential to sales and marketing, but very important, right?
Yes.
So negotiation. Why nice but smart guys in the gender neutral sense of the word, right? Finish first, right?
Right.
Okay. So we live in Salt Lake City, where basketball has pretty much permeated the culture here. Just about every auto dealership and or restaurant has something to do with basketball. We had Karl Malone here. We have John Stockton here. We eat at the Tuscany, which is a really nice restaurant that's owned by Mark Eaton. They have a 7-foot, 4-inch chocolate cake that is really fantastic. It's actually 7 inches by 4 inches, but you still need to bring 4 friends to eat this piece of chocolate cake, right?
It's disgustingly large, but disgustingly good.
Oh my gosh, it's fantastic. So, anyway, basketball is a big deal in Salt Lake City, and before all of that happened, when I was growing up in Salt Lake City, Larry Bird was the big guy, literally. And you'd see him around town, really nice guy. One of the coolest people you would ever meet. But his agent, who is not quite so famous nor quite so tall, is Bob Wolf. And Bob Wolf is no longer with us, but he wrote 2 books on negotiation that I think are really relevant for us today. And, you know, you're asking probably, why aren't we talking about Herb Kelleher or Richard Branson or, you know, some other famous negotiator in the aviation industry, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, we do talk about them sometimes. But today, there's actually a lot of parallels between aviation and sports. One of them is that they're both elite meritocracies, right?
Among other things, yes.
Yeah. I mean, what percentage of the world's population is involved in aviation?
Not much.
Probably not.
Couple, maybe.
Yeah. So I think I read somewhere that like 2% of the world's population are pilots, and even smaller percentage than that are, A&P technicians of different specialties and things like that. So it's a very small field where very talented people are very sought after, right?
True.
It's also includes a lot of wealth. There's a lot of money in the aviation industry. That's no secret.
Oh.
And a lot of money in sports too. Okay. Both aviation and sports have very complex transactions with lots of people who feel like they have a say in everything that happens in different ways. And if you don't believe that, read the news about Santa Monica, right?
Exactly.
Or any other airport or any other large corporation that has a flight department. There's a lot going on, right?
Absolutely.
And different people with different motivations who are not always in favor of what you're trying to do, whatever that is.
Yes, and that's not even talking about the regulatory people.
Oh, yeah, that's true. All right. And they're also very small worlds. So on one end of the spectrum, you've got like New York real estate, where if a deal goes south or if you don't get along with someone, you can just keep going. Somebody else will be along in 5 minutes, right? To rent your apartment or whatever. But on the other end of the spectrum, we've got aviation and sports, where there are only so many people. You have a very small market for your product or service, and everybody knows everybody, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So with those 3 things in mind, a lot of the things that Bob Wolf talks about are really relevant to us. And one thing he says is there's a misconception that people who are dishonest and cunning are going to win. They're not. They're going to lose. That's what I believe. And that's because of these 3 things, right? Very different from some other parts of the world. So his rule number 1, and he has a lot of different rules from different parts of, he actually wrote.
Sorry.
That's okay. So I picked 3 rules, 3 Bob Wolf rules from amongst his 2 books. I like the number 3. It's a good number for a podcast. And it's also an easy number to remember. And there were 3 that really stuck out in the process of reading these 2 books. The first one being always leave money on the table. Now, this is the opposite of what just about anybody who's taken any kind of a MBA course has learned, right?
Well, true.
Yeah.
But you leave money on the table and in such a manner that they know you have, you could ask more.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean, however, that you undersell your product capability.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't always take top dollar.
Right. So Bob says, I haven't done a single contract that I couldn't have gotten more money on. I always leave money on the table. This is in an interview with Inc. magazine. Inc. says, forgive us, but a lot of people will read that and think you're nuts. Let's assume that you can sell a computer system for $220,000. You're saying you're going to take $200,000 for it. Why not pick up that extra 10%? Wolf says, because it's possible to push the price too far to create antagonism, and that extra 10% just isn't worth it. If someone feels that you held them up, they're going to take it out on your business, or if it's an employee, they're going to take it out on you. In my case, they're going to take it out on my client. Make him miserable, trade him, get him injured, something like that. Obviously, a negotiation isn't only about money. You always want to leave some money on the table and moderate your ambition. A reputation for greed is going to cost you in the long run. And there was another podcast I was listening to about a week ago where they talked about the mental airbag. Have you heard this concept?
No.
It's actually really funny, but really true. You make someone's mental airbag go off in a negotiation, and suddenly they become defensive, right? So they sense danger. They sense, this guy's really out to get me, and boom, all of a sudden they're backpedaling, and the negotiation is all but over. At least as far as a favorable outcome, as far as you're concerned, right?
True.
Yeah. So always leave money on the table. It's not as crazy as it sounds, right? Okay. Second rule, know your numbers.
Absolutely, know your numbers.
Right. This is the hardest part for me because numbers are not second nature to me like they are for some people. But, before we go into a negotiation, if we have time, John and I will usually sit down and talk about all of the possibilities and what effect that's going to have with us. And luckily, with my company, with the marketing company, everything is from a catalog, so we don't really negotiate. Prices are prices. In your company, however, where you do business consulting, it's hard to price, right?
Oh, there's no way. It's always different.
Yeah, so it's always a negotiation, and you have to know your numbers in order to,
of course,
do well in that, right? So Bob Wolf would take in a table. You try to make a one-page document with all of the relevant data. Here's what all of the similar players at similar teams are making. Here's all of the circumstances of that and all of the other commissions and things that are happening in response to that. Mm-hmm. And he'd throw that on the table at the beginning of the negotiation and say, here's the market. Here's the data. Do we agree that this is what we're looking at in terms of the atmosphere in which we're playing? And that way everybody in the room knows that he has done his homework and they're not going to take him for a ride.
Right.
Okay. And being totally transparent with that, which is really, really cool. One thing you don't want to be totally transparent on is what number you've agreed with your client or what number you're willing to take. That's a confidential number that you have in your head. And he says you always want to take your best target, which is a confidential number, and then back that off by 5%.
And if you approach it right, sometimes the person you're negotiating with will go over your number anyway.
Right, exactly. In which case you may want to bring him down a little bit because of rule number 1, right?
Exactly.
Okay. And say, I could take that, but given the competitive data and everything else, I think we need to go for this number. I think that would be more fair. That will get around like nobody's business if you're willing to do that. So,
yep.
Okay. Rule number 3 is always have a Toronto, right? And of course there is a story here.
You need a picture on the screen?
I need a picture on the screen. So this is a postcard from Houston if you're not seeing the screen, if you're just listening to the podcast. So this is 1973, so going way back to the dawn of time. Bob Wolf represented John Matuzak, who was the first draft choice of the Houston Oilers. That's way back, right?
Mm-hmm.
Houston's offer was unrealistically low, Wolf believed, and he told Matuzak to sit tight. Houston refused to budge too until Wolf and Matuzak flew to Toronto to discuss the possibility of signing up for Canadian football. Just by good luck, Wolf insists, the two men were photographed by a wire service. When Wolf returned to his Boston office, Houston General Manager Sid Gilman was on the phone. Bobby, he pleaded. What's this about you and Matuzak being in Toronto? Let's get his contract settled. 2 days later, Houston agreed to pay Matuzak 50% more than the original offer. So if you've got somebody that is unwilling to budge and is being unrealistic in your offer, it really helps to have a full pipeline of other opportunities. And to subtly or not so subtly, and aviation is a small world, so people will know, that you're talking to their competitors.
Yep.
And there is nothing wrong with that. That's professional detachment, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So, you never want to be disloyal to an existing customer, and you never want to divulge any confidential information between clients because that is the kiss of death. But everybody knows that if you're in business, you are after clients. And if you're going after clients who happen to be competitors of each other, fair game, right?
Of course.
Right. Okay. So I have one other story about not backing down. This is our backyard. In fact, when we first moved in, there wasn't even that wire fence back there. There's 11 acres behind our property that is pretty much just field. And then behind that, there is a canyon. So it goes back into the mountains. And there's a lot of wildlife back there. There used to be more, unfortunately. But, suburban creep and all that causes some of that to go away. But when we first moved in, and even now, there's deer and antelope and skunks and badgers. And let me tell you about badgers. This is a meme that I saw on Facebook, and it comes up every once in a while. I know I can't find the source of it. It's just one of those things that's floating around the internet. So the European badger looks like a nice guy who would invite you into his cozy and clean burrow to have some tea. An American badger has got a shank and is waiting for you in a dark alley so he can rob you and spend your money on methamphetamines. So those of us who are our European friends, you probably recognize when I say badger, you're not thinking about the same thing that I'm thinking of when I say badger, right? So the badgers in our field are like the one on the right. Okay. And we had, when we first moved out here, a Doberman mix. He has since gone over the Rainbow Bridge and is waiting for us in heaven. But while he was here, he took very seriously his duties of protecting the house and the family and everything else from all of the cast of characters that were in the 11 acres behind us and even behind that in the mountains. So this badger decided to wander by the house, and our dog and this badger were facing each other off, and neither one of them was going to back down. And I think the dog knew he'd lose his membership in the dog union if he let this badger come any closer to the house. And this badger, of course, is in an existential crisis where he probably has other creatures encroaching on him from other sides, and he's not going to back down. And I'm thinking, do I get the garden hose? Do I yell? But I didn't want to break their concentration because they were just in a rumbling, growling, snarling, deadlocked staring contest, right? So this went on for what seemed like an eternity, and eventually, however they did, they negotiated the terms of the boundaries that they were going to agree on, and ever since then, we didn't have any trouble with the badger, and the badger didn't have any trouble with us. So this is what I think of when I think about not backing down. No matter what's at stake, you don't necessarily need to be nasty about it. But you do need to have a line that you're not going to cross. And even if that means walking away from the deal, cool. We walk away from deals all the time.
Yes, we do.
And our clients walk away from deals all the time and almost always end up better for it for one reason or another. Either a better deal comes along or the other party comes back to the table at a later time, and you'd be surprised how often that happens, especially since it's a small world, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
It is surprising how often that happens, actually.
Right, exactly. So you don't have to be the badger. You can be the Doberman. It'll be fine. Okay, so lessons from Bob Wolf, just to recap. 1, always leave money on the table, as opposed to its corollary, which we all learned in business school, never leave money on the table, right? Mm-hmm. Know your numbers, which we all learned in business school. That actually jives. And the third thing is don't back down, even if it means, no deal. No deal is a perfectly fine response.
Yes, it certainly is.
Okay. So this episode was brought to you by our Aviation Marketing Lab, where we provide the tools and the consulting to help our customers get through some of these tough negotiations, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of office hours that we spend with our lab clients is about how do I negotiate this deal? Or, how do I get the numbers to figure out what price to propose for this situation? And all of these tools and all of the consulting that come with that is really designed to help small companies act like large ones and to have the same advantages and, to really level the playing field.
And to grow into larger ones.
Exactly. So we'd love to have you join us in our marketing lab. It includes some of the smartest people in the aviation industry, and you should be one of us if you are one of those, right?
And if you want to talk to us, we're going to be in NBAA.
Yes, absolutely. That's October this year, so late October. If you're going to be there, please do set an appointment with us, and we'd love to talk with you.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining us, and have a great afternoon.
See you next time.